can get Ben the better on that new show you're talking about. Yeah. Man. Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome to the On the Contrary show presented by PrizePicks. We got a interesting slate brewing this weekend, so we got the perfect guy to help us break it down. Neil Orfield, aka Player Q DFS. Neil, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I'm really looking forward to talking the slate over with you. It's pretty rare that I talk about a slate this early in the week, especially after the last slate just ended yesterday. Usually I have a little bit of time. It's just been trying to wrap my head around this case around this slate all day. There's a lot going on here, a lot of moving parts. But before we get into that, I kind of want to give the people what they want. I got to ask you, how does it feel to have lost your spot as the number one player in the world and to drop all the way down to 37th place after the Fantasy Football World Championship? How are you feeling these days?
Yeah, that was a tough blow to the ego, but I mean, those 36 other guys that finished on top of me, like I got to tip my hat to each and every one of the 36. So we'll be back next year to try to get first. But yeah, Neil, man, what place did you finish?
Oh, that's rough. Yeah. Sadly, I did not make it to the Fantasy Football World Championship. So I guess I'm 201st. I'm going to call myself 201st.
Nice, man. Yeah. Last week's slate was actually like kind of a tough one where it felt like none of the stacks really hit, and it was really sleepers that kind of got you to the top. And it feels like it's been that way for a few weeks. Like I noticed our Awesemo like Twitter, they're always like, if you like have these guys that are leading the slate, you must have a time machine or something. So what have you noticed regarding sleepers in the past couple weeks?
Man, I guess it's been so long, so many slates since the Sunday slate that I barely remember what happened on that slate in particular. I feel like for the most part, we've been able to, I mean, a couple weeks ago we had Sony Michel. This week, James Robinson. Have there really been that many sleepers that have outperformed like the guys that we really liked in the tools? I'm trying to think of who the sleeper picks were this week. There were a few who went off. None of the Lions guys really got there, did they?
Craig Reynolds was making a push. I think he had 100 yards.
Okay.
The one guy that really like messed up my weekend was Duke Johnson, or like seemingly out of nowhere. Like he wasn't even active like 2 games before, and then I didn't read the tea leaves because that morning they were like they announced the third Miami guy inactive, I think. So I was
Malcolm Brown.
Yeah, Malcolm Brown.
I didn't see that.
I was like, dang. Well, that means that maybe Myles Gaskin's going to play even more. Like clearly
against the Jets too. So
yeah, that didn't work out at all. Also, like I thought they were going to be a lot more pass heavy than they were. But if somehow Duke Johnson, that was the winner there.
Yeah.
Anyway, hopefully we can find some of those contrarian pieces this week that'll make you jump to the top of the leaderboards. We have a lot of COVID news to come, so I know some of the teams like the Jets and the Chiefs are kind of questionable this weekend. We'll have to see what happens, but don't really have all that information yet. Guys, if before we get going here, you could hit the likes and subscribe button. That gives us that positive feedback we need to be able to deliver you the best sleepers. And then on the Awesemo website, you can use the promo code On the Contrary for 25% off the Awesemo Plus Platinum Weekly package. That gives you projections, ownership, boom bust tool, top stacks, a ton of tools you can add to your arsenal to make you a better DFS player. So make sure to check out awesemo.com for all those tools. All right. Let's talk about some games. So we're going to go game by game. There's some really interesting ones on this week's slate. Let's start with Atlanta versus Detroit. Obviously, that's the game that people are going to want to tune into this Sunday when they watch NFL football. But man, the Falcons have been so like terrible recently. And then you look at this line, they're projected to score like 24 points, which is higher than they've been. 6-point favorites versus the Lions. So I'm like, is this the game where they can finally put together a performance that'll win you a GPP? How are you like looking at this Atlanta game?
Yeah, I think this is one thing that you and I have in common for sure in DFS is that we love the ugly games where it's just two bad teams and you don't really know how it's going to go. I think I'm going to really love playing both of the quarterbacks actually in this game, both Matt Ryan and Jared Goff. It's just two of the worst. The Falcons are 31st in the league in total DVOA. The Lions are 29th. So there should be these bad offenses should be able to put up some points in this game. The total is 42, so not an extremely high total, but I think there's a lot of variance there just because it is two bad offenses against two bad defenses. I'm going to hope that the offenses can take advantage. And in the lineups where I'm not playing the offenses, then maybe I'll take some shots on these terrible defenses. I haven't actually looked at the prices yet, but if they're cheap enough, maybe it's worth playing these defenses as well. But yeah, I really like playing Matt Ryan in this game. Russell Gage has been really coming on. I'll probably be doing some Matt Ryan to Russell Gage stacks. Might try some Cordarrelle Patterson stacks. I think it's important to remember if you're setting your fantasy cruncher to, with the Falcons, include the running back in your stacks. I don't know what to make of Kyle Pitts. So I guess I'll throw it back to you with that. How much do you think you're going to be getting to the Atlanta stacks? Who do you think you're going to be pairing Matt Ryan with?
So one injury note in this game is Jared Goff is sick with COVID right now. So we're going to have to wait and see if he plays this week. That could make a big difference because if we're stacking up the Atlanta Falcons, we want Detroit to put up some points. That being said, I don't know. Tim Boyle is really like a huge downgrade from Goff. So maybe we get the new Gardner Minshew of the week, Tim Boyle. We'll see. But I think Atlanta, regardless, is going to look pretty good. You have Kyle Pitts getting 20% of the targets when he's on the field, and he's out there about 85% of the time each week. And then Gage has been at 22%. So although we've seen Gage pop a lot more recently in the box scores, it's really going to be a coin flip between these two guys each week. The difference in projection is only 1 point. So I think that both are pretty intriguing. We have both as positive leverage in the tools. So Gage at 9% ownership compared to 12% optimal. It's at 8% ownership compared to 12% optimal. This is on the DraftKings boom bust tool. So those are nice metrics to look at. And in general, I find that if you like the receivers, then you gotta put the quarterback in your lineup. So is that kind of how you approach it? Is like if you kind of lean towards quarterbacks that have like well-priced skill players, or how do you like think of it?
Yeah, I think more and more. When a receiver looks really good and the quarterback is not getting a ton of ownership, I've been more and more playing more of that quarterback just to, bring down the overall ownership when I'm playing that chalky receiver, the receiver who looks really good. So yeah, I've been more and more trying to take advantage of spots, and I do love it when you can get both a quarterback and a receiver at low prices. That's a spot that I like to go a lot that the field doesn't often go to. The field tends to like to play Mahomes, Josh Allen, anybody who's hand building wants to be playing quarterbacks who they know and then they know have huge upside. But sometimes the upside of a guy who's a $5,000 quarterback and you can find a receiver for $5,000 with him, I think is just as high, and you can slam in then some of those higher priced running backs. So yeah, for sure, I like to take advantage of low price stacks.
Definitely, yeah. On the is there anyone else on Atlanta that you consider stacking up?
I don't think so. I mean, I feel like Tajay Sharp has been looking. I didn't actually look in the tools yet this week, but I feel like the past few weeks he's looked really good in the tools and has kind of let us down. Maybe he's somebody that you could consider getting to. Yeah, he's actually negatively leveraged this week, so he's not a really great play. Olamide Zacchaeus doesn't look that great. I think it's mostly just going to be those guys. The only other Atlanta player that I might consider, just maybe, could we go back to Mike Davis? Like early in the year, we wanted to play him all the time. Now he's against the Lions. People have kind of come off him. He's still getting double-digit rushes, or close to double-digit rushes most weeks. Do you think that he could be a guy who gets more work just because they want to run it a lot against the Lions? Do you think he'll be playing any Mike Davis?
It's tough to really know because Cordarrelle Patterson has gotten about twice as many carries in the past 4 games as Mike Davis. While Mike Davis has kind of been steady in the route running. So I don't think he's a bad option, like even as part of a stack, but CPAT is maybe a guy I'd consider, but the amount of work he's getting just isn't going to compare to like similarly priced players at the same position. So we do have him as negative leverage this week because of that price tag. Now on the Detroit side, DeAndre Swift is coming back from the shoulder injury. Jamal Williams was out last week due to COVID, but he's back. So I think that this Detroit side, like we've seen Amon-Ra St. Brown, like be the guy that's been getting it done recently. So how do you feel about St. Brown and then Swift and Jamal Williams? Like how will you approach that situation?
Yeah, so assuming that Swift is back and he's a full go, I think I'm going to really like him. Jamal Williams, yeah, I think I'm going to go to Swift. I might even consider, if I am running a Detroit stack out there, I might consider running Swift as the receiving end of that stack. If he's coming back and he's healthy, because they do like to throw to Swift. Amon-Ra St. Brown has been a guy that has looked really good in the tools in recent weeks, and I keep kicking myself because I'm like, man, I can't really go to Amon-Ra St. Brown. How much do I trust that? And he just keeps getting out there and putting up points. So yeah, I think I'm going to play some Amon-Ra St. Brown this week. The tools only ever project for 7.8% ownership, 8% optimal, so very slightly positive leverage there. I think that he makes a lot of sense if you are game stacking the game. I'll probably have him some places as one-off as well, just because he's been getting such high volume. He's 5,600. I think he makes a lot of sense. Do you think you're going to be playing some Amon-Ra St. Brown or DeAndre Swift or any Jamal Williams?
My instinct is to go to Swift as a run back. He does score like a lot of his points receiving, which is something that like normally the running back run back is disadvantageous because you don't want a lot of rushing attempts, but because he gets so much of his production receiving, that's not really a huge concern here. Monroe St. Brown, I think that like he was actually a lot higher owned than I was expecting last week. In the final, he was like 15%, and I didn't even think he was a good play, but he got it done. That's why I'm the 37th best. And he's only targeted 19% of the time he's out there, which is that's okay, but it's not a level that's going to have any sort of like high upside week to week. So
Can I ask you to now patch a leak in my game here? Because in my run backs, I usually allow for wide receiver, tight end, or running back. And I feel like I've heard you say it a few times now that it doesn't really make sense to have a running back as a run back. I've always thought that it made some sense because there should be positive correlation there. If the opposing running back is putting up points, it should be positive leverage. Is going to force the quarterback to throw more. But it sounds like you found that it's actually negative leverage to have the opposing running back because they just don't score quickly enough in general. Are there exceptions to that, like running backs who have explosive potential? I mean, you just said that DeAndre Swift can be an exception. Are there many exceptions to that rule where you would include the opposing running back as the run back as opposed to a receiver or tight end?
Yeah, I think that this is a good example of maybe like why the boost function in Fantasy Cruncher might be good, which it kind of like assigns if you have this guy in your lineup, like tweak these other projections a little bit. So like if a running back is a really good play, like James Robinson in the past 2 weeks, that's a lot more advantageous as part of a stack because you don't need as many points, or like you don't need as much like performance above what we're expecting. But then when you like running backs that get there mostly on rushing, it's just that they tend to prosper when their team is playing with the lead. And the ideal situation in a game stack is that both teams are kind of like trading the lead. It's like a real back and forth game. That's what like creates a lot of plays in the game because neither team has that incentive to really like slow down the pace. So that's kind of the dream situation. The only thing is that doesn't happen like every week. So it is kind of hit or miss each week, whether that super game stack goes off. So there's some counteracting factors at play there.
For sure. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to the next game here. Okay. So if you came for good games discussion, you're in the wrong place. We got this Jacksonville versus New York Jets game. Jacksonville is a 2.5 point underdog versus the Jets, but that could easily change because numerous Jets players, including Michael Carter, have COVID right now. So
It is. It's the other Michael Carter, according to
Ah,
NBC Sports. So it's the defensive Michael Carter who's on the COVID list.
dang, I didn't know. Like, damn, that's so confusing. All right,
I,
that
yeah,
I'm
it was
glad you
in the
pointed
headline. Is
that
the only
out.
reason I got. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a good note. Now, barring like any COVID updates, how are you going to approach this Jets Jags game?
Yeah, I don't know what you mean by not calling this a great game. This is the top two quarterbacks taken in the draft. I mean, how could you not be excited about Trevor Lawrence against Zach Wilson? No, but I try not to fall into narratives too often, but that is a narrative that I'm a little bit intrigued by. Like, are they going to want to try to feature these bad young rookie quarterbacks to try to prove that they made the right pick? Maybe. James Robinson is a smart play. But I think that I will probably take some just as leverage off of James Robinson. I keep falling for Trevor Lawrence. I might be just a sucker. He just looks like he should be a good quarterback. He was a number one pick in the draft. I keep thinking that Trevor Lawrence is just one of these days he's going to break out. They're letting him throw, and then I follow the game, and it's like they get down to the red zone and just three and out once they're in the red zone. So it has not worked out for me going for Trevor Lawrence. Last week it almost worked out. He took it down to the 1 yard line on a rush, and then of course James Robinson got there instead. But yeah, I keep falling for the Trevor Lawrence, and I think I'm going to do it again just as a leverage play against James Robinson, because I could see Trevor Lawrence. I mean, this is such a bad New York Jets defense. These are the two worst defenses in the league in terms of DVOA. So I'm going to try and take advantage of that and hope that maybe this now another week removed from Urban Meyer being removed as coach, maybe they'll figure something out and try to get Trevor Lawrence going. But maybe I'm foolish for doing that. Do you think Trevor Lawrence is a foolish play this week?
I was on Lawrence last week. It didn't pay off as you mentioned, but I think that there's some positive factors for Lawrence. Like first of all, James Robinson, I think is going to be very popular this week. And then like that kind of is the opposite game script of if you have Lawrence get there with like 3 passing touchdowns or something. So I think that part is interesting. And his receivers aren't bad. You have Marvin Jones, Chenault. The one spot that is really uncertain is tight end, because like we had O'Shaughnessy who looked like a good play from the projections, but I don't think he really paid off. But Dan Arnold's coming off the injured list this week, so that will be a spot at tight end that's a little bit tough to predict this week. So I think Marvin Jones and Chenault are reasonable options to stack up. On the Jets side, I know like Zach Wilson hasn't been like that impressive, but as you mentioned, these are pretty bad defenses. So is that also is this a spot where you're going to be taking guys from both sides of the game, or how are you approaching it?
Yeah, I think I'll be playing some Zach Wilson, and I haven't been falling for Zach Wilson as much as I have with Trevor Lawrence, but I think in this spot I'm going to try, just because it's 22-20 is the expectation in the game. And I think this is just a spot where there's high variance, and maybe the Jets want to feature Zach Wilson to show him off against a really terrible defense. That's narrative based. Usually you want to probably stick to the numbers more than the narratives, but I might take some shots there. He doesn't look that great in the tools. We have Zach Wilson negatively leveraged, 4% projected ownership, 2.3% optimal, 1.3% top stack. So it's not a play that's really supported by any numbers, but I still think I'm going to play some. Sometimes you just have to go with your gut a little bit, and my gut is telling me that, not that this game will. My gut isn't telling me that this is a great game but it's a spot that I just want to take some shots on it and see what happens. So I think I'll be doing some Zach Wilson, Jamison Crowder stacks as well. And then the running backs. I mean, now that you know that Michael Carter, the running back, is not on the IR, I'll bring up that he looks pretty good in the tools, in the boom bust tool. 13% projected ownership, 22% optimal. At least I don't know if he's been taken out now, but yeah, so he was looking really good this morning. I think that he makes some sense. I mean, he's coming off a big letdown game as the chalk, so you love that. I always love when a chalk piece fails and then is in another nice spot the next week, and maybe the crowd's going to move off him because he failed them the last week. His price has come up. He's up to 5,200 now. So it's just kind of I don't know if you call it a pay up to be contrarian. He's still only 5,200, but it's a much better matchup. I think, it makes sense to take some shots on Michael Carter. Maybe the tricky spot is just knowing how much of a role he's going to have this week. Do you think you have any interest in Michael Carter?
Yeah, I'm into it. I think that Last week, his workload wasn't as exciting as we're used to, only 1/3 of the rushing attempts, and he ran routes on 40% of the plays. But if that goes up like to what he'd been getting before, that should be really solid for the price point. And he gets targeted a ton, 25% of the time when he's running routes. So I think that Michael Carter has a lot of reasons to be excited. That's one spot where like maybe James Robinson and Carter, like Carter does score a lot receiving, but that is one where maybe you want just one side of that one. And then at receiver, I think Crowder is a good call. The other guys I'm looking at, Ryan Griffin, their tight end, has been ruled out. So Tyler Croft coming back his second week from injury. He was out there 54% of the time last week. I think that this is a pretty interesting sleeper where like his playing time could be really high, or it could just be kind of in that 60% range. We don't really have much data one way or the other, so he's kind of interesting. And then Keelan Cole with Elijah Moore and Corey Davis out. He had been out there 80% of the time over the last 2 weeks, so that's enough for me to have some significant interest. Although, yeah, this game is obviously a contrarian one. So, anything else about this game you're looking at?
No, not really. I mean, Braxton Berrios has slightly positive leverage in the tools at 1% projected ownership, 1.5% optimal. So I don't know. Is he going to be the featured goal line back again next week? Maybe we can take shots there. Probably not. Do you think you're going to be playing Zach Wilson? You brought him up and I didn't ask you. Do you think you're going to play any?
Yeah, I think he looks okay. The things that work for him, I think Crowder and Keelan Cole are both solid plays, and then you can kind of get that punt tight end with Croft. So I think you can definitely make a Zach Wilson stack that's decent. In addition, like the team has been like pretty neutral pass run with a 42% run rate at neutral game scripts, so that potential is there. Jacksonville is the more run heavy team, so I think there's some reason why I like that narrative that you mentioned with them kind of having this dual quarterback. So that's a fun one. All right, the next one we got here, Drew Lock is starting in place of Teddy Bridgewater, who fortunately it looks like he didn't get the worst of that injury on Sunday, but he is out this week. They're facing the Raiders in Las Vegas, and the Raiders play in a dome. So I think that very positive weather shift for the Broncos. But they are on their backup quarterback. Drew Lock has been pretty ineffective when he started in the past. How are you handling the Broncos?
Yeah, so it's not somebody that I had really thought about much. He's not somebody that I really want to target a lot. But I guess in the dome, Drew Lock is 5,100. He can sling it a little bit. I don't hate. He doesn't look that great in any of the tools, but 2.3 projected ownership. That's kind of a. I love those really low owned guys in 5,100. And his receiving options are obviously really good. You like Jerry Jeudy, you like Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick. They all look really solid. So yeah, I think it probably makes some sense. They're all Jeudy and Cortland Sutton are both projected for under 3% projected ownership, over 3% in the optimal lineup. So I could definitely think of worse stacks than Drew Lock to Jeudy or Cortland Sutton. Do you think you'll be playing some Drew Lock stacks?
I think this might be an example of where like even though this is a contrarian option, it might not be my favorite one just because they run the ball preferentially on the Broncos 46% rush rate at neutral game scripts, which is about 10% higher than the league average. And then the individual plays are also like somewhat difficult to get to. Like Jeudy is 5K on DraftKings, 6,800 on FanDuel. Patrick and Sutton are above 4K on DraftKings. So I think that the key to being contrarian, you gotta like pick the guys that are at least priced favorably if they don't project that well. So I'm not ruling.
It's hard seeing Cortland Sutton at 4,200 and not wanting to play him. they haven't been throwing to him. Maybe that's a change. Maybe this will be a positive change for him. Do you think there's any chance that just Drew Lock comes in? Maybe he's going to want to lock in on, pardon, that was unintended pun there. Maybe he's going to want to lock in on one of these guys more than the others. Is there any chance you think that he might like Cortland Sutton a little bit better than Teddy Bridgewater did? Maybe he wants to focus more on one of these guys. It does add a little bit of variance to the position. I don't know. Does that add to your interest at all?
Yeah, I think that with different quarterbacks, they tend to target like different ADOTs more. So I haven't looked into that like a ton, but Sutton and Judy both are projecting to be very low owned at sub 3%. And they are maybe that last guy in that could get you a win. Where I don't know if Sutton could probably have a big game without Locke necessarily getting there, but I think he is in play, at least barring a lot more value at wide receiver. Now on the Raiders side, this one's a little bit tougher to break down because Darren Waller is questionable, so we really don't have a great sense of if he's going to come back this week or not. But Renfro has been pretty amazing, and then at running back, Jalen Richard is, I guess he's back for this one, but Kenyon Drake has been out with injuries. So do you have any guys on the Raiders you're targeting at this moment?
I mean, Hunter Renfro looks great. Projected for 10% ownership, 11.1% optimal lineup. So yeah, I think I'll be going back to Hunter Renfro, even at the elevated price tag. He seems to be the clear number one there. None of the other receivers look that incredible. Some slight positive leverage on Zay Jones, but pretty neutral. As far as tight end, I haven't really looked at Foster Moreau. I'm gonna check that out because I think that Waller is going to be out again. Is my sort of read on the situation. And if he is, then I think I'll probably have some interest in Foster Moreau, but not a ton. He had the one big game early in the year and hasn't really done it recently. So I don't know what we can really expect there. Do you think you're going to be playing any of those guys?
Yeah, I think Renfro is solid. Regardless, he's been getting targeted a ton. If Waller is out, that just helps him that much more. So I think that he's definitely the guy to look at. And then the tricky thing with the receivers, I guess Edwards and Zay Jones have been playing most of the snaps recently, but neither one is targeted particularly often at 10% and 13%. So that kind of lead me to Jacobs. He has been getting a good amount of work, more than 50% route running the past 3 weeks. Even with Richard back, he ran routes on 52%. And then he got 60% of carries last week, and then 75% the previous two. So his workload, Josh Jacobs, has been pretty good. I know he's not a very popular guy among fantasy players, so that would be somewhere that we can get contrarian.
Yeah, Jacobs looks good in the tools. He's projected for 13.8% ownership. It surprises me that he's positive leverage at 13.8% ownership, but in the optimal 15.4% of the time. The Broncos' rush defense just has not been that good this year. I think sometimes I have trouble getting away from like defenses that have been good in the past. I still think of them as being good, and like Cincinnati, I think of as being, or for the beginning of the year, I thought of Cincinnati as like the worst defense in the league, and that's not really the case. And it's also not the case that the Broncos are that good. So I think that Josh Jacobs can definitely take advantage of this matchup.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's a good point, that Denver's defense, it's both not as strong as it used to be, but also weaker versus the run this year. All right, guys, let's talk about our sponsor PrizePicks. So they have daily prop-based contests. You can get a $100 match bonus with the promo code Awesemo. You build parlays with 2 to 5 different props, and you can pick them from any sport. I mean, like you can do like crazy ones, but I mostly stick to NFL and NBA. But that's a lot of fun. And you can use our tools on the site to compare the projection with the prop to really get an advantage on PrizePicks. So we have to have at least 2 props to put together our lineup for PrizePicks. What are a couple that you're looking at?
I like the over on 240.5 pass yards for Ben Roethlisberger. I don't think that Ben is good anymore. I just think that they are going to be throwing the ball. They're going to have to throw the ball a lot to keep up with Kansas City, and Kansas City is a little bit depleted. So it's a low enough line that I really think that Ben Roethlisberger can probably get there. And then I also like the over on 75.5 rush yards for James Robinson. Even though I'm going to be playing some Trevor Lawrence in DFS, I think the most likely scenario is that they're going to be rushing it a lot with James Robinson, and 75.5 rush yards is relatively low. So I think that I like James Robinson and the over on 75.5 rush yards. You see any that you like?
Nice, man. Yeah, a lot of the passing yards ones look a little bit low to me, but the one that really stands out is Matt Ryan. The prop right now is 220.5, and he's facing the Lions. So on the year, he's averaged 238. So that's already 18 yards above the prop. And then you have to factor in that the Lions' pass defense is subpar, and this game is taking place in a dome. So I think that there's a lot of reasons why we can expect Matt Ryan to do better than he has been. So I think we got a nice little prize pick parlay going here. So I just threw down $20 on that. Hopefully we can cash it. Guys, let us know in the comments who you guys are looking at in PrizePicks. All right, let's talk about this Pittsburgh KC game. So obviously Pittsburgh is a huge underdog. Kansas City is a team that is being hit by COVID right now. I think Kelsey is on the COVID list, and Tyreek, I think I saw something about, but it's not going to matter until Saturday because they get an opportunity to have one negative test and then be in that week. So a little bit tough to know who to target on Kansas City, but we know for sure that Pittsburgh's got an uphill battle to win this one, and that they're going to probably have to pass a lot to attempt to do so. So is Pittsburgh a team that you're looking at, or are they too far down the list?
Yeah, they're not somebody that I had thought about much until you brought them up. And then I'm like, yeah, that's actually sort of interesting, especially against Kansas City, because Kansas City is so depleted. It might be a little bit easier to score on them. And I think that the offense for Kansas City is still going to be able to score. So yeah, Pittsburgh is going to need to put up points. They don't look that incredible in the top stacks tool. Big Ben projected for 1.9% ownership, but optimal 2% of the time. So very slightly positively leveraged, but I think that's a spot where we can kind of pay attention to the Vegas lines and see the Vegas lines will kind of tell you what you can expect from the Kansas City defense as we get more news about who's in and who's out with COVID. And I think that I'm going to have some interest there. I don't think that Big Ben is good. I just think they're going to need to throw the ball. They're not afraid to throw the ball. And Kansas City's defense, if they are depleted, might be really bad. So yeah, I think that Big Ben, Deontay Johnson makes some sense. I keep going back to Chase Claypool and thinking that he's going to have a big week. He was targeted 2 weeks ago 9 times against the Vikings and just did nothing this week. So that was a pretty big disappointment for me. I don't know. I'm going to have to look at Chase Claypool's stats a little bit closer, I guess. But at least Big Ben and Deontay Johnson, I think I feel comfortable with. Do you think you're going to be going to that, Zach?
I'm kind of on the fence right now. I think that Deontay Johnson's price, even though he gets targeted a lot, that price really accounts for that. But the passing volume should be really high for Big Ben here. So I think it's interesting. Claypool, I feel like, was it 2 weeks ago in that game that he made that first down and was celebrating? And then, okay, so I'm wondering if maybe his playing time last week is a little bit lower just because the coach is like fed up with his antics. So I feel like there's some volatility there, regardless. So he's someone completely off the radar that you might consider. Ray McLeod, though, he's the minimum. He's been out there about 75% of the time over the last 3 weeks, and 90% 2 weeks ago against Minnesota, targeted 15% of the time. So Ray McLeod is a guy that I don't think I've really been playing in fantasy, but he kind of makes a stack click. And then Pat Freiermuth has been the one kind of getting it done. He had another touchdown last week, but then he left the game early due to injury. So if he's back this week, maybe people that are just looking at maybe, okay, he didn't have a touchdown last week. I think he got a target or something in the end zone, dropped it. But I feel like he's been a promising tight end. So any interest in McLeod and Freiermuth?
Yeah, so we are seeing negative leverage currently in the tools on all three of the receivers, all four of the receivers, I guess, for the Steelers. So they don't look incredible, but again, I think we follow what Vegas tells us about the game to some extent. Freiermuth does seem to be a tight end that they like to target. He actually he was targeted for the last play of the game in the Vikings game and dropped it. So yeah, they like to get him involved. They're not afraid to throw him the ball in the end zone. I think it makes some sense. I think I can definitely play Freiermuth. I would include him in some stacks, and Ray McLeod doesn't seem like people are going to want to be playing. I guess we have projected for 3% ownership, which is actually higher than I would have thought for Ray McLeod. I guess the field is pretty sharp these days, so maybe it makes some sense that people are noticing that he's getting opportunities. But yeah, I think all of them make some sense. None of them look incredible in the tools. None of them are popping as like 10% optimal, but I wouldn't be afraid to play any of them in a Big Ben stack or as a run back, maybe in a Kansas City stack. Do you think you would play any of them as any of these guys as a Ray McLeod or the lower end guys as a run back in the Kansas City stack, or would you only play the higher end Deontay Johnson types?
I think you could definitely run it back with McLeod. He's a solid play. That's really what I'm looking for more than anything, is that you get a good value out of your run back, because they are going to be a lot higher owned as part of a Kansas City stack than in a random lineup. So you got to account for that by having it be a good play. Deontay Johnson, a little bit pricey. It's going to be really hard to fit him in a Kansas City stack because Kansas City skill players are expensive and Johnson is very expensive this week. So maybe that's one where you just don't run it back because Johnson could have a big week, or Harris, and not be in the optimal. One other note here is that Freiermuth is questionable with this concussion. If he's out, Zach Gentry actually ran routes on 56% of plays last week. And that's only with Freiermuth playing half the game. So that could be even higher if Freiermuth is out from the beginning of the game. So Zach Gentry might be that value play this week that no one's really considering. All right, let's go to LA and Minnesota. And then also Kansas City and LA, both phenomenal passing offenses, and both are about the same in the top stacks tool. LA is 20% the top stack, Kansas City 17%. So what's your top stack of the week? Is it one of these two teams?
Yeah, so I'm going to be watching the Vikings game. So obviously I have to play the Rams. No, yeah, they are the top stack in the tool. I think that's going to be a fun game. I think the Vikings could put up a fight against the Rams just because they have such a good passing attack with Justin Jefferson. Unclear if Adam Thielen's going to be back for this game. I think I'm going to go to the Rams the most. My guess is that they will be my top stack, in part because, I mean, we have the ownership on Mahomes and Stafford are both at 8.5%. And in the top stacks tool, Stafford, the top stack for the Rams, is 20.5%. For Kansas City, it's just 16.7%. It's kind of hard to get a read on that situation, obviously, because we don't know if Hill or Kelsey are going to play. That will change things. My guess is that it will make the top stack odds go down, I would assume. But then again, then you have some cheaper options that kind of become interesting as well. So that'll be a fun one. I'm curious, do you have any plan in place? Maybe you haven't thought about this much for if Hill and Kelsey are both out. We just got news that Josh Gordon is coming back, but do you think Byron Pringle becomes the number one there in that case? And also Blake Bell is also on the COVID list. Does Noah Gray become interesting? Have you given any thought to this, to the Kansas City stack in that event that all those guys are out, or is that still something you're going to work on throughout once we get that news?
Oh man, yeah. My general thought would be just to wait, but you put me on the spot here, so let's take a look. Okay, so I guess the main thing I'm looking at when guys are getting a bump in playing time is how often they've been targeted when they are playing. Josh Gordon, he's only been targeted 8% of the time he's been out on the field, which is pretty miserable. Maybe the guy I'd be looking at is Hardman. His playing time has been down a ton recently. He's only played on about a third of snaps on a good day in the past 6 games, but if he gets a playing time bump, he's been targeted 17%. That's the most of any of the non-Hill and Kelsey players on the Chiefs. So if guys are out, Hardman could get a big bump. I guess between the tight ends, I don't really have a good sense of if Blake
Yeah.
Bell or Gray would get.
So Blake Bell is on the COVID list as well. So I would assume it would be
Okay.
Gray if both Bell and Kelsey are out. But would they be throwing it to the tight end in that scenario? I guess is what it comes down to.
Yeah, that one's tricky. He's run 97 routes this year, Noah Gray. He's only been targeted 7% of those. So that's like 7 targets over basically 2 full games or 2.5 full games. So not the most inspiring results so far. I think maybe just give a big bump to the wide receivers because Kelsey's 21%. Like okay, some like half of those are going to Gray or something, but then half are going to be spread out among the other players. So that would probably be what I'm looking at, and I think it does really help if Kelsey and Hill are ruled out to get to Mahomes, just because that's a lot better value on the other guys that aren't priced as complete studs. So
Okay.
I don't know.
So you think
like,
the top stack odds would go up in that scenario? What do you think ownership? I guess I'm putting you on the spot again. I don't know if how much of this you do or you just have your algorithm do it for you. Do you think I guess I would assume that the ownership would actually go up on the stack just because the value options would be so good?
Oh
Is that
yeah,
your
definitely. I think
okay.
that like it just makes the stack a lot more affordable if Kelsey and Hill are ruled out. So the only question is like what can we really expect from the team? Like in most cases, when you have these stud receivers ruled out, it does decrease the passing offense, but not quite as much as people might think. So I think that Mahomes would still be a good play, and the points per dollar on the stack would just go way up. So I think it could be a good thing. Um, we'll have to wait and see on that one. All right, let's talk about the Seahawks. I had a pretty miserable outing yesterday. Like it seems like every week, and then you look at their box scores, like dude, they only ran like 50 plays or something. Like when the league average is like 60 something, and it's really easy to understand why they're not getting there with that in mind. But then you have them as 7-point favorites versus the Bears. Like, what do you make of this Bears versus Seahawks game?
Yeah, it's hard. I keep falling for Russell Wilson. I keep thinking he's gonna get it back at some point, right? He's not that old. He can't be washed at this point. And then every time I watch him, I'm like, oh yeah, this guy's washed. He's not good anymore. So it's hard for me. I still want to play him kind of. DK Metcalf looks incredible right now in the boom bust tools. He's one of the most positively leveraged plays. And that's with currently we have Tyler Lockett is in the boom bust tool. So if Tyler Lockett is out, I would assume that DK Metcalf looks even better in terms of optimal percentage. I don't know. His ownership will probably go up in that case as well. But currently with Lockett in, we've got him at 12% owned, 15.9% optimal. So DK Metcalf looks really good at 6,400 against the Bears. It's just so hard, but I guess that's I mean, if everybody's thinking the same thing that I am, we watch the game, Russell Wilson doesn't look good. That's the reason you get DK Metcalf at 12% with Lockett out, when in the past he would probably get a lot of steam. So I guess that's why you get him at low ownership. I don't know. I'm struggling a little bit with whether I'm going to go back to it. Do you think you're going to be playing some Metcalf and Wilson stacks this week?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, the pricing on Metcalf and Lockett does reflect the team's like poor performance, with Metcalf at 6,400 and Lockett at 6,700. One of the questions for me is going to be like, are we going to know that Lockett is a full go? Because he did come off the COVID list. We did see with some players, they were a little bit limited in their first game back, most notably Miles Gaskin. So, like that makes me a little bit more likely to go to Metcalf over Lockett, even though Lockett's probably the better receiver in a vacuum. And then the other Seahawks, I think Gerald Everett has been pretty solid. He had a good game again yesterday. But yeah, I think this one, it's hard to have a ton of confidence in the Seahawks, but they do have a really good matchup versus the Bears. And the main thing with the Seahawks is they haven't been able to sustain drives at all. But then maybe the Bears like won't be able to like put up huge numbers of plays either. So it kind of balances out a little bit. I am a little bit suspicious of this 6.5 point line, though. It does seem overly slanted towards the Seahawks. Just kind of intuitively, but I don't know. Like it's hard to argue with Vegas.
Right.
Is there anyone on the Bears side that you think's worth looking at?
I mean, Fields is kind of cheap, so maybe you could play Justin Fields. I haven't looked closely at the Bears side, but I believe Fields was 5,100. He's the only one that I had taken note of as somebody 5,200 against the Seahawks. Yeah, I have some interest there. He doesn't look great in the top stacks tool, so that's something that I've sort of taken note from you a little bit early on in the year. I think I focused more on boom bust with quarterbacks, and I tried to. I'm like, well, even though they don't look great in the top stacks tool, they're optimal so much more of the time. And then kind of listening to you, I've kind of come back to, well, I take advantage of correlation in every other spot. Why am I not doing it with quarterbacks? So now I've started focusing more on the top stacks tool, and Justin Fields just doesn't, he's 0.4% likely to be the Bears are likely to be the top stack. So it's sort of hard to get there. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be playing a ton of the Bears. I guess David Montgomery is the one spot that you can definitely take advantage of. David Montgomery looks really good in the tools. I had him written down as somebody that he's not very contrarian. We do have him projected for 12.9% ownership, but 15% optimal is positive leverage. He's only 5,700 against a pretty bad Seahawks defense and against a Seahawks team that has been struggling to put up points. So I do like David Montgomery in this spot. Do you like any of the Bears?
Yeah, here's the thing with the stack is the Bears have been the most run heavy team in the NFL this year with a 51% run rate in neutral game scripts. And that makes it really tough to stack because basically when they have success early in the game, they're going to stop passing the ball, which that pretty much like is the woe in fantasy is if you have those fires early in the game and then the scoring just kind of like the spigot turns off and you're ending up with the same points you had at halftime. So that would be my concern with the stack. But with Montgomery, obviously that's not a concern. He's getting a big workload, and I think that he's priced pretty favorably, 5,700 on DraftKings, 6,600 on FanDuel. So he does look like a pretty strong play. I think that makes it easy for the game too, because you might just play him and not worry about Seahawks or anything. All right, let's go to the Bucks versus Cam Newton. So the Bucks they've been having some bad injury luck. Leonard Fournette is out for the rest of the season. Last time I saw, and then Chris Godwin he's out for the rest of the season. Mike Evans is questionable this week. Antonio Brown is coming back. So I think the number one way to approach the Bucks is going to be Ronald Jones and Antonio Brown. But what are you looking at with these the Buccaneers?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I'm looking at. I'm going to be playing a lot of both of them. I guess you could go to some Tyler Johnson. Assuming that Evans is out as well, I think maybe some of those guys become a little bit more interesting. But I think Antonio Brown is going to be. Currently he's only projected for 11.8% ownership. I would think that that's going to go up if Mike Evans is ruled out. But so is his. So currently we have 11.8% ownership, 18.3% optimal. I would assume that both of those numbers go up a lot, and we'll have to pay attention to how much the ownership goes up relative to the optimal percentage. But Antonio Brown as a wide receiver one for Tom Brady at 4,900, it makes a lot of sense. He is not like the cheap wide receivers that people sometimes go to just because they're cheap. He's going to be the guy, I would think. So yeah, Antonio Brown is going to be hard to get away from. And same thing with Ronald Jones. I think that if he's the number one running back, and he can obviously get in the doghouse pretty quickly. We've seen it happen before, but I think that they'd be more reluctant to go to Le'Veon Bell than Leonard Fournette if Ronald Jones doesn't play well. So I think I'll be playing a lot of both of them. And assuming that Mike Evans is out, I think I'll also go to some Tyler Johnson. I think he would look really interesting at 3,900, depending on how chalky he gets. He could become one of those cheap receivers who gets a lot of steam just because he's cheap. But he might look really good if Mike Evans is out as well. I think those are the main places that I'm going to go. Where do you think you're going for the Bucks?
Yeah, I think those are good reads. There are a lot of question marks here. Another guy is Perryman, who is out on the COVID list. So that remains to be seen if he plays, because he did play 90% of the snaps 3 weeks ago. So that's the guy they've liked. Scotty Miller came back last week and played 75% of the snaps. So like the playing time is like very hard to pin down here if more guys are out. Antonio Brown's the one guy that you could count on as kind of being a full go. Even though he's coming back from this ankle injury, they did say he's been looking the same as before the injury. So that is a little bit reassuring that he might not be limited on this first game back.
What about Rob Gronkowski? Sorry.
Yeah, Rob Gronkowski, I think, is a solid play for sure. He's been out there about 80% of the time in the last few weeks. The one concern I have with him is just that it seems like the public loves playing Rob Gronkowski, so it's hard to like get a huge advantage playing him. But he does have a sneaky nose for finding the optimal, so it kind of works both ways.
Yep.
Any interest in any Panthers this week?
So Cam Newton kind of has the same problem where he looks good in the boom bust tool and then doesn't really look that great in the top stacks tool. So in the top stacks tool, we've only got the Panthers at the top stack 2.7% of the time. But then he's so cheap. I have some interest. I could be talked into some Cam Newton, DJ Moore stacks maybe. He looks in the boom bust tool project for 5% ownership, but optimal 7.7% of the time. So that looks pretty good. And that you would think that he's going to be throwing the ball. Is he going to be benched again? He's been benched the 2 weeks prior to last week. So there's always that concern, but I think that's something that, you can, maybe that drives the ownership down a little bit. I have a little bit of interest in Cam Newton. He got there this week, so wouldn't be surprised to see him get there against the Bucks. Do you think you'll be playing any Cam?
He might be tough to get to because Tampa suppresses the running production, which is how he normally gets there. But DJ Moore is looking like a really strong play. He got 11 targets last week and 10 in the previous 2 weeks each. So he's been averaging more than 10 targets a game, even with Cam Newton under center. The unfortunate part is his fantasy points have been about the same as the targets. So he hasn't done like very much with them, but I think that like there isn't much target competition there, and it's versus the Bucks where they're gonna probably be forced to throw more than they would like to, even though Cam Newton is their quarterback. So I think that he's pretty interesting. One thing I want to mention, this is about the time of year where maybe the playoff picture starts coming into play as far as how teams are going to be kind of allocating their playing time. So maybe a little bit early week 16 to be thinking about that. But has that crossed your mind at all this week?
So it hasn't, it's not something that I've given a ton of thought to yet, but I think that it is something that adds a little bit of variance to the situation. I think it is around the time now that you can start thinking that teams are going to want to see what they have in some younger players, teams that are out of the playoff picture. So maybe that helps your Michael Carter shares. Maybe they want to play Michael Carter a little bit more now that the Jets are out of it. James Robinson, do they go to Daria Gumbawale? He's I think he's younger. I guess I don't even know. I think he's younger. Maybe they try him out a little bit. I don't know. Yeah, I do think that we're getting to the point in the year where teams that are eliminated might rest their veterans a little bit more and see what they have in some younger guys. Are there any in particular spots that you think you're going to be taking advantage of it, or have you not figured exactly where you're going yet with young guys?
I haven't figured it out quite yet. Some teams that recently got eliminated, the Seahawks are under 0.1% chance of making the playoffs. And that's a team where we're really looking to target guys. But they've been so bad recently that I'm kind of like feeling they're going to be motivated regardless. The Panthers also 5-9. They're pretty much out of it at this point. The Falcons, but I think it could be interesting on a case by case basis to look at, like you were saying. So we'll have to. I think especially next week and the following week, we'll probably be able to make more plays based on that.
Does it make it harder to play David Johnson and Rex Burkhead against the Chargers for you? Man.
Yeah, that's a good point. Houston, they have been playing their vets a ton. The problem is their rookie was Scotty Phillips, and he's been out. So I don't think they have any young guys on the squad right now. Yeah, I know. But let's talk about some contrarian pivots this week. So let's at the end of the show, we always give our top fade and top pivot. So what are you looking at this week as far as ownership, and who might be a little bit too high for your liking, and what's the pivot?
Yeah, so I think I guess I said I might play some Deontay Johnson, but he is looking a little bit high in terms of the leverage score. We have him at nearly 10% projected ownership, only almost 6.4% of the time. I think I might go to some Viking stacks. So I think that I might be playing some Justin Jefferson as a pivot. I just I don't know if the numbers really support it, but he's just a guy that always kind of gets overlooked. And I think that I'm going to have some intrigue. He is slightly positive leverage in the tools. He's a little bit more expensive, so it's kind of a pay up to be contrarian spot, just because I think the Vikings are going to have to be throwing it, and I think that they could have success against the Rams. So I think it's probably Justin Jefferson as my pivot. How about you?
Nice, man. I think my fade. I'm kind of looking at the top stacks at this point in the week, and the Chargers, they have the highest quarterback projected ownership right now versus the Texans. That's one of those where they could get up pretty quick and not have to pass. So it's going to create a lot of situations where Herbert has a good game, but not a great one. So that one's pretty iffy. I prefer like spending up a little bit on the skill players and getting the Rams or Chiefs compared to that, or just punting at the stack completely. So, all right, should be a pretty good week, guys. If you can hit the like button and subscribe, this is going to be a really important week, to stay tuned to all the injury information leading up to the slate. And if you haven't checked out our sponsor PrizePicks, make sure to check them out. Promo code Awesemo gets you $100 free match bonus, and you can make a lot of bets on props that will be profitable using our tools. Guys, good luck, and we'll catch you next week on the Contrary.